Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Kep, co-founder of From Day One, our forum on corporate values. Welcome to today's webinar. We're excited about this topic, looking at how coaching can be applied holistically to give more personalized guidance. But before we get started, I want to share something special we have for today's attendees. One of our monthly virtual conferences is coming up on Wednesday, February 16th, and it's titled Beyond Diversity, Bringing Substance to Inclusion and Belonging. It's going to be really valuable for employers who are embracing their increasing diversity in order to sustain a sense of belonging among their employees, as well as boosting engagement and retention at a time when that's very important. Thanks to our partners, including today's sponsor, we have some complimentary VIP tickets available for those who joined today's webinar. I'm putting a link in the chat right now, and I recommend you check this one out. The regular price for our conference tickets is $149, and this link will give you a free VIP ticket for the whole day's activities. Today, we'll be exploring the topic conscious coaching, getting in touch with the emotional factors. Here's what it's about. Insightful leaders recognize that coaching is not just about strategies and tactics, but about the employee's mindset, well-being, and resilience. Without getting into psychotherapy, how can coaching be applied in a more holistic way, giving more personalized guidance? Can this approach bring benefits for the whole organization, including a greater sense of inclusion and engagement? That's what we'll explore. Our sponsor today is BetterUp. I'll tell you something about them. BetterUp Care is a platform for mental fitness that unlocks personal and professional growth. As a preventative approach to mental health, Care helps everyone build the coping mechanisms needed to manage stress and anxiety that might be around the corner and continuously move toward greater states of thriving, no matter where we are on the mental health curve. Now, a few quick logistical items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to you on demand soon after the event. So you can look out for an email in about 24 hours with a link. That email will also have info on how you can get professional development credits for this session from both the Society of Human Resource Management and the HR Certification Institute. You can look out for a written account of the conversation on our website at fromday1.co. And then remember this, about 45 minutes into the webinar, we'll have a Q&A session. You can submit your questions anytime you think of them using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and our moderator, Lydia, will pose them. Now I'd like to introduce our MC for today, a maestro of moderating, Lydia Dishman. Lydia is a staff editor for Fast Company, who's an expert on topics that include leadership, technology, and the workplace. Lydia has also written for CBS Money Watch, Fortune, Popular Science, and the New York Times, among others. Okay, Lydia, take it away.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We've got a stellar lineup and a really interesting discussion teed up. But first, I wanted to say, we've heard about the historic quit rates recently, and it's not hard to see why. In fact, Forrester just found that more than half of workers are experiencing burnout globally. And of those, 88% say that it's hard to get excited when thinking about work. So leaders are scrambling to stop the exodus, but many are failing to recognize one key factor, that people want to feel like their employer cares about them. And there's a disconnect. A new Harris poll found that while 80% of employed US adults consider an employer's professional development and training offerings an important consideration when accepting a new job, only 39% said their current employer is helping them improve their current skills or gain new skills to do their job better. Workers want to believe that their employers are as invested in their professional growth as they are. It's an important factor for staying engaged. They also want to feel that their employers are recognizing their individual needs for professional development, much the way so many companies are offering things like flexible work that takes into account personal needs that allow people to get their job done and maintain work-life balance. So that's where our discussion comes in. This is obviously emotional terrain, and it requires a targeted, individualized approach. So to talk about trends and best practices, we've assembled a diverse group of professionals, and I'm going to turn to them now and ask them to introduce themselves and tell us briefly about their work. Dennis, why don't you go first?
Great, thank you, Lydia. Pleasure to be here this afternoon. My name is Dennis DiMaggio. I live just outside of Baltimore, Maryland, with my wife and my 3 daughters. I always tell everybody that's why my hair looks like this. because of my living conditions. I currently serve as the Chief Learning Officer for Breakthru Beverage. Breakthru Beverage is a leading beverage alcohol wholesale distributor in the United States and Canada. We have about 7,000 associates across the network. We've always been an organization that places a high value on coaching, and so I'm honored to work with a team of learning professionals across the U.S. and Canada who are really very honed in on developing the team at Breakthru, and so I myself consider myself to be a student and a practitioner around things like Clifton Strengths, strengths-based leadership, emotional intelligence, helping leaders to create a psychological safe environment on their teams, as well as applying things like type theory to individual and team development. But it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, thank you so much. And thanks for all of that context. We are definitely going to dive into some of the things that you talked about a little bit later. Christopher, why don't you go next?
Thank you, Lydia. I appreciate being here. And so my name is Chris Lubrano, and I work for IFF, or International Flavors and Fragrances. And they make fine perfumes that you'd find in any fine store, and also consumer fragrances that you'll find in your grocery store for detergents and sauces and spices and all sorts of confections. And right now the research is in alternative proteins. So a lot of the plant-based work to try to make them taste great and also the texture perfect. So there's still a lot of work to be done there. But my end here is I manage HR strategy, organization effectiveness, and also focus on change, values, and culture. And this past year, it's been interesting for us because we doubled in size. We had a merger and we just finished the integration. We did it all virtually. So I'm anxious to meet colleagues that I've been working with, but I actually never saw before. So that'll be something to look forward to in 2022.
Before you put yourself on mute, how many people are in the merged organization now?
24,000.
24,000. Okay, great. Thank you. Marissa, how about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Dr. Marissa Berman. I'm a senior behavioral scientist at BetterUp. And we are a human transformation platform that includes coaching solutions for really a broad spectrum of whole person needs, from mental health and well-being to career and leadership development to inclusion and belonging. And Steve mentioned CARE, and that's one of our many solutions. We support large global organizations, and we've been in existence since 2014. And just a little more about me, I'm also a licensed psychologist and an executive coach. And for my first career, I was a professional athlete on the US ski team for a sport called inverted aerials. And I learned very early on how critical the emotional factors like mental health and well-being are for performance. And it inspired a career that focuses on the intersection of those critical areas.
We'll ask you to do an aerial at the end so we can see you jump. Erica, how about you go next?
Very good, thank you. So my name is Erica Reynolds. I am the Vice President of Enterprise Learning and Talent Development with City of Hope. And so my areas of focus are going to be, of course, learning and leadership development, but also performance management, engagement, and onboarding. And City of Hope is a comprehensive cancer center located in Southern California area, even though we have quite expanded our footprint. We are, in fact, opening up our Orange County location later this year and lots of other things. And so dealing with healthcare and then really specializing in cancer, one of the goals of City of Hope is to actually eradicate it. And you don't hear that often. It's like, oh, we treat it, we try to do these things, but we want to eliminate it. We want to say that there is a cure for cancer and it's not an issue anymore. That's the ultimate goal. So I really love it. It's a very complex organization. We have a research institute on site that literally gives advanced degrees there. And so they're also able to be really innovative with the types of things that they do to look at this. And so another thing that we do is also we focus on diabetes too. So I don't know if you all may or may not be familiar, but one of our doctors was the one who came up with the artificial insulin to treat diabetes so some years ago. So that came out of City of Hope. And so our goal, what we've been experiencing is like many, we've been experiencing extreme growth. I think we've grown like 3 times within the last 5 to 6 years. And we're going to continue to do so. And that's caused quite some change going on in the organization, which started as a mom and pop, that's now this great, wonderful institute. And how do we support our employees through this, right? And also through the pandemic, there's COVID. And so yes, cancer patients get COVID too, which added an extra layer. And so we are really focusing on development opportunities and well-being for our enterprise.
How many people?
Yes, currently about 8,000, which will be increasing very soon to maybe about 10.
Wow. Okay. Important work. And last but not least, Mary.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Lydia. My name's Mary Vinette, and I'm the Global Head of Learning and Development and Inclusion for Technicolor. And a lot of people, when I tell them where I work, they say, Technicolor, isn't that Wizard of Oz or something like that? Yes, it is. It's the same company. That it's I think it's 106 years old, Technicolor, based in France, which is where I am living. I'm living in the countryside in Normandy, France. And which was a pandemic moment, which is great to be on this time zone because it's a global organization. Technicolor has business, the traditional business, which is in the film area. So many different types of visual effects. So big films, the big Marvel films, those kind of things, visual effects there, everything from that to the Super Bowl commercials where you see a character that it's all visual effects like that, which we don't think about, but are in most of the content that we're consuming these days as we binge our Netflix. They also do connected devices. So a lot more engineer kind of making what's inside of your modems and set-top boxes, that kind of thing, and a manufacturing arm as well. Locations all around the world, about 15,000 employees globally. I have a really small team that deals with all the way across these businesses. So lots of different countries, different people, different issues. I'm a PCC certified coach with the International Coach Federation. And I have an internal practice in the organization, mostly executives, but also people who really want coaching and who are really looking for their own development. So we focus on coaching, we focus on training and manager development as well. And everything has been turned upside down since the pandemic started, and we really have moved everything virtually, and everything is the speed of light. So it's a lot more e-learning, and it's a lot more having a conversation afterwards. So no better time to take a coach approach, and that's what we're doing. And I also co-chair our global task force for diversity, equity, and inclusion as well, which is, as we all know, a huge topic these days too.
Mm-hmm.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to start with a broader question. You've all mentioned coaching. Some of you have mentioned training. Some of you have mentioned professional development. Let's talk about the difference. Marissa, I want to start with you. How does coaching differ from training? Is there a different emotional landscape involved?
That's such a great question to start to differentiate the two. And coaching is very different from training. Training will give us knowledge, but coaching helps us to apply that knowledge and really truly turn it into skills and habits. And at BetterUp, we actually have a model that supports this called the learning to doing to being model. And without the support to really apply that knowledge from training, most people will forget everything they learn pretty quickly. That's so common that it has a name. It's called the forgetting curve. And coaching helps to support that long tail of learning to build real and sustainable growth and change. And then I'd love to add a little bit about the emotional landscape. And I think that does depend on the focus of coaching, whether it's for mental health and well-being or for more advanced professional skills like management and leadership. But generally speaking, coaching does require a psychologically safe, supportive, and a trusted partnership where we can be vulnerable, to have courage and strength and patience and compassion to examine ourselves and grow.
The reason that I was asking that question, because particularly with regards to the emotional component of it, we have seen, especially since June of 2020, many companies embrace diversity training. And that can be a very emotionally fraught landscape for a variety of people. Courageous conversations need to happen, and they can be very emotional. So I feel like there's somewhat of a related piece here. And Marissa, you said, I think that you have to create these safe spaces. So I'm curious to know how the rest of you are handling that in your organizations. Erica?
Yeah, excellent. So it has been quite a time for DEI issues. And it can be very sensitive, to some people. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to deal with it. And so being able to coach leaders on having these conversations with their employees has been really, really critical in our space. Making them feel comfortable or giving them the tools to ask those questions to, coaching the coach, right? Asking the questions to their employees when they are, when sensitive things do surface. How do you handle that with your employees? And what if it's in a meeting, or what if it's in a one-on-one? And what do you need to say to get to the root of it, right? And again, it's not about imposing your opinion. It's uncovering and understanding where the disconnect or the issue is coming from. We really focus, especially this past year, on behaviors and really teaching the behaviors of inclusion, which is going to be more than just a class. That's what does it actually look like to live it. So on what Marissa was saying, that's going to be really critical. And also when we do have DEI courses, but I think that it's really important that you incorporate coaching pieces into those courses themselves too. So while they're learning it, you intertwine it with breakouts or what have you, and that's helped.
Okay. Dennis, how's it working there?
Yeah, a great perspective from America. The thing I would add is there's a dynamic tension, right? There, on the one hand, you want to create an environment where people feel like they can share what they're thinking, they can share what they're struggling with. At the same time, you don't want to create an environment where people feel like they could be attacked for some reason. And so it's as a facilitator, as a manager, as a coach, one of the primary jobs that we have is to drive out fear to whatever extent we can in conversations. And so the ability to say we're going to talk about really important, sensitive things here, but we're going to do it in a way that everyone can contribute. And if you don't have to have something perfect to say in order to share, you can feel free to mess up, feel free to make a mistake here. And as facilitators and coaches to model that, and to always kind of be pushing people out of where they're comfortable, but do that in a way that you reduce the risk a little bit for folks.
Chris, can you talk a little bit about developing trust in safe spaces?
Sure. I think what I've seen just is in cases where coaches are trying to do this, is trying to be genuine, giving people the option to say, we're all here. I'll be vulnerable if I'm a coach or if I'm in a coaching situation, and I'll share about myself and hopefully make that important. And also to be non-judgmental in anything that we say or do, just to hear stories, to listen, and to empathize, to be compassionate. I think in a non-judgmental zone, people will then be a bit more relaxed and more apt to share. So that's sort of our strategy.
And before I come to you, Mary, because I want to get your perspective on this as well, I do want to note to the audience, yes, all of our panelists are from fairly large organizations, but a lot of what they're implementing, I believe, can be implemented in smaller companies as well. So please do take notes. Don't feel like because they're with a big company with a lot of resources, some of these things can be done at little or no cost. So, Mary.
So it's an international organization. And when you talk about the DEI landscape, it's really complex in our organization because a VFX company is going to be looking at these issues in a different way than a company that is largely engineers. people look at it differently in India than they look at it in France or in Brazil or in Canada or in the United States. It really is different all the way around. So it becomes very complex. And like we're talking about coaching today, and coaching is really about letting the person bloom like a beautiful flower that everyone can be. And I think that's what DEI is about too, is really figuring out like how each person can be themselves. And so if like this year, Dennis, I think you said about like people are terrified. They don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be attacked. And also, we've got to learn about it in order to start doing something about it. And I think that's what we've focused on a lot in the last 2 years, is really defining what do we even mean by this on an international scale. And one of the big initiatives that we did, which was my favorite thing, probably because I did it myself, and it was a series, it was a podcast internal called Share Our Stories, where each time we would have a theme in order to say, like, what does it mean to be a woman in India? It's not one thing, right? Or what does it mean to be a gay male somewhere in the world? And we had males of male in his 60s, male in his 50s, male in his 40s. So all like it's that intersectionality that happens, and you start to see that people are people. And if we're given the safe space, we can be that beautiful flower that we're born to be, right? So I love that the things are all tied together and that there's such a spotlight on it right now,
Intersectionality is such a great word. And I feel like a lot of what we're talking about is intersectional itself, coaching and professional development. But when I'm thinking about professional development, I often go back to this stereotype of you're identifying high performers, and those are the people that get the professional development. Coaching seems to be a much more equitable thing that you can do with people. Everybody can benefit from it. You don't have to just look for the hypos. Now, the question then becomes, how do you identify the people who should go through this? I mean, are you coaching everybody? I mean, you're from big organizations. So first I want to get Marissa's take on what defines a good candidate, and then we can talk about where the rest of you are picking from.
Yeah, that is a great question. And so in our approach, we ideally want coaching and the people who are being coached to align with the organization's needs and strategy. So we like to start with organizational priorities and then work to identify specific skills or behavioral shifts that are needed and in which populations to address those priorities. And that can be by department, by level, region, or role. And then the final steps is that you align those skill gaps with the right type of coaching engagement to build those particular skills, because coaching can be for different topics to build different skills. So well-being, management, DEIB, change leadership. And then there's this readiness for coaching issue. And our data shows that that's a very critical factor for getting the most out of the coaching experience. And it basically boils down to interest and willingness to commit the time to coaching. And this sounds really complex, and it can be really time consuming in practice. So we've actually developed an algorithm that organizations can use for this purpose. So with some basic inputs, we can recommend the right type and the right amount of coaching to the right people in an organization at scale. That being said, we found in our own research that mental health and well-being is so foundational for people to show up, perform, team, collaborate, lead in any role, that we do believe that mental health and well-being coaching should be available for everyone. Yeah, and especially now, given what we've all been through for the last few years.
Yeah. And we're not out of the woods yet, it feels like. So Erica, how are you identifying?
Again, this is more of a newer initiative. Traditionally, we have leadership development programs, And we have them by certain level of the organization. And so if you're in lead 1 or 2, we call, which, based on your title, you are going to automatically be given an executive coach as a part of that program for about a year. Okay. And so that's how we approached it initially. What we did add to it within the last 1.5 to 2 years was internal coaching as well. And normally people would be nominated or by their leader, this person needs help with this. And it did have a more performance issue tied to it. And so we said, that's not it. That's not working, right? We have to focus on coaching people and giving them the skills to also coach their direct reports. But you mentioned something earlier, Lydia, too. What about the DEI focus of it? And how do we make sure that everybody's getting some kind of access to it? And so we did a twofold. As a part of our, we began a Lead 3 program, leadership development program, and it had a DEI focus to it. So those who normally got tapped for, participation, that's not how this worked. You could self-nominate. You could be nominated by a colleague or peer or by your leader. And then we went through a blind selection after some criteria were met to decide on who got chosen. So for that program, we initially were going to have 30 people. We expanded it to 60, and we made sure that it was focused on having at least 50% representation from underrepresented groups at City of Hope, which at the present time included Black, African American, and Latino. And so we made sure 50% was represented in that. And so with that program, you do have coaching. And so we have what we call our faculty coaches that take on a group of about 6. And so it's group coaching and peer coaching when they're broken up into smaller groups. And so that's how we've been able to reach that group. We have received so many wonderful just praises about it, the experience, the help, because they feel seen. They're able to, again, not given solutions to their problems, but talking through it, they're coaching, and it's really been a great benefit. So we're ecstatic about it. And there are multiple ways to do this, as you said, even with a small company, big company, that you can be cost effective. And so that's 60 people who are getting coaching, and they are from levels of supervisor and up, so they don't have to be very high level.
Now, I do think that it's important for people on the lower rungs of the ladder to make sure that they are, as you said, feeling seen, because especially now in the past couple of years with people working remotely, it's really hard to feel seen, even though we all have these little boxes on Zoom. It's, if you're not walking the halls, it feels like you're invisible as soon as you turn off the camera. So Mary, how's it working at Technicolor?
So it's really a unique situation because I'm the certified coach and it's 15,000 people. So I'm not like marketing my services out there. At the same time, people know about it. I've got 2 direct reports, and they're both going through a coaching certification this year to try to make the official coaching a little broader. There are times that we engage with external coaches, but a lot of times that has to deal with something specific that needs to be fixed, right? Some outcome that we're going for. Whereas the coaches that I have tend to be people who know about the service, or sometimes it's the individual that knows about the service, right? The HR or the manager will know. They'll come to me and say, I think this is a good candidate. It tends to be someone who casts a wide net in the organization just on a practical basis. But what we also do is do it from the bottom up. So a lot of the people in the organization know who I am because I'm training people a lot. And I'm always like, hey, I'm also a coach. You too can participate. So there's an element of people like outside of when we say like identifying high potentials and having a talent plan. A lot of times that misses people with the what'd you say, Marissa, the willingness and the knowledge enough to do it. And that's what really matters. Like if someone wants to, remember my flower metaphor, they're going to bloom, right? They're going to, it's going, that's how nature works, and humans are part of nature. So what I do to weed out people who don't really want to do it is they have to fill out a pretty extensive form that feels like therapy in order to partake in coaching. And the reason I do it is to make the distinction between what's therapy and what's coaching. Like I'm not here to diagnose your problems, but what I am here to support you is in your own self-reflection. And so people, and that's hard work to sit down and go, what's my purpose? Ooh, I don't know, right? So
Yeah, for sure.
it's hard. So, but if someone's willing to go there, those are the people that I want to help them get to wherever they want to go.
Dennis, are you having people self-select or are you picking?
Yeah, so this is great feedback from the rest of the panel. I'm writing down. I'm shamelessly stealing all of your ideas. But at Breakthru, we kind of have three different approaches to it. We do hire some external executive coaches for some senior members of our team, and that works out really well. And then we have members of the learning team who are certified coaches either through Gallup or through Marshall Goldsmith. And so we have a number of folks who are certified to deliver coaching from the learning team. But to your earlier point, Lydia, that impacts a very small number of people, even with us. And so the only way this scales is to train managers to coach, is to train people how to take off their manager hat for a little bit, put on their coaching hat, and be able to create that environment where people feel like they're heard, feel like they're developing, feel like they can talk about who they want to be tomorrow as opposed to today, and how the manager can help coach them to get there. So our company, what we do is we invest a lot in what we just call coach the coaches. The learning team will coach our managers on how to coach their people and bring out the best in them. And you talked earlier during the introduction about in the middle of what's being called the Great Resignation, people feel like they're not heard. People feel like they're not, their company doesn't value them. What I would contend is that people want to be coached, and there is a significant number of people who want to coach other people, and they want to make an impact. They want to leave a legacy with other people. And so by training managers and leaders to coach their people and have them be able to kind of step back and see that impact they're having on folks and this new set of skills that they've developed, I think it's one of those things that knocks over several dominoes at once, because you're making life better for your leaders and you're making life better for all of the associates.
I've got to believe that the leaders that want to be coaches are that much more engaged in their own jobs because they feel like they can pass on some institutional knowledge. And one of the things that I think about, Chris, I'm going to come to you next, but I did want to make this point, and we can address it in more detail later. I think about the people who are at entry level or maybe 1 or 2 years in, and they perhaps started working remotely almost immediately at the beginning of their career. And what you miss by not being in the office, sure, you can get your work done. I'm not talking about productivity here. I'm talking about the institutional knowledge that you sort of get through osmosis when you are walking through the halls, seeing the way different parts of the organization function, because we all know that accounts payable is a very different culture within a culture than, let's say, the engineers are or the art people are. So I think that there's an extraordinary opportunity for workers who have been rising through the ranks to be able to reach down and offer some of that type of knowledge to workers that may have not had the benefit over the last couple of years. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but anyway, Chris, tell me how you're picking, and is that working there for you?
I agree with what you've just said. I do think that the entry-level folks, especially in the hybrid environment, really would prefer to be on site to absorb the culture, to absorb everything they can. So it's something we're really worried about and concerned about when all this is over. Just do we have enough folks there to be mentors? With respect to everything I've heard, it's really grateful to get so many great ideas. We do pretty much everything that others have said. Executive coaches through performance issues, and really try to get people to their next level. And lately, as Dennis had just mentioned, we're really trying to emphasize, because the company is fairly large, and we want to get everybody at least to have that experience. And so spending a great effort helping managers really adopt coaching behaviors and really making the craft of management, the art of management, something very important. As important as your technical expertise, as your business expertise is time spent with your employees, and really trying to demystify some of this to say, Yep, none of us are professionals here in this field, but we can do it. We can listen. We can offer help and just really be there for the person. So that's kind of how we're trying to position it as something that people can pick up if they're serious about it, but also spread it out to thousands of people across the organization.
Erica, you were talking about people being able to self-nominate. I'm wondering if there is a particular skills bucket that people are looking to develop. Is it in the emotional intelligence, soft skills area?
That's what they need to develop, to be honest with you. There's a lot of that that's needed, but that's normal, it is. And so no one should get offended by it, but that's what we found out.
We could all use a little bit more.
We could all use it. And that winds up being actually the most popular offering because we do wind up, giving that course as a part of the development, and then they're coached on it as well. And they just love it. But when they think of why I want to be a part of this program, I'll be honest with you, many come in with just, I want to be seen, I want to be a leader, I want to be recognized, but they leave out feeling something totally different. Like, wow, I have an impact and I have a say-so in how my experience, happens within this enterprise. It's not always about my boss. And maybe I can even coach them, which I've heard that some have been doing. Some people
it's like reverse mentoring.
The reverse mentoring thing. So that's been happening. And we actually had some feedback from someone who's not in the program. It said, I know 3 people who are in your Lead 3 program, and I've heard them actually do that reverse coaching with their bosses and kind of shift, the way that conversation could have gone. So I was very proud to hear that.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, that's certainly a check mark in the is this program successful box. Mary, what are you seeing people asking for? What skills do they want to develop?
So it's a lot of change management. People are trying to cope, right? It's like, you're going to hit me with another change. What, how can I do this? And how can I manage all of the things that I need to deliver and I'm going to be a little facetious here, nice. Right? Like, what do you want from me? Right? Like, I'm doing and the people that we have work so hard and they're so good at delivering. But some of this stuff that I find what I'm asking people to do when they come to me for all this kind of soft skills, emotional intelligence kind of stuff, I'm starting with really foundational behaviors. Like you're right about this virtual environment. We're missing some of this institutional knowledge and the connection that we have. And also it's forcing us to dive into behaviors. So I'll give you the example of stop talking. Like, just hold a pause.
There's a free resource that can be implemented at any company.
Stop talking. Hold a pause. Just let some air in the room. Especially when we have kind of this overlap in the electronic space, it's like, let it breathe a little bit. You're going to get better answers. You're going to give better answers and you'll make better decisions. And that's so foundational to coaching, to creating a safe space, all of those things. And really, it's hard to do. Like, you have to practice, right? And the other one would be asking questions. And that applies to all these things, change management, learning the digital space. Like, get better at asking questions and listening to the answers by not talking.
Asking questions is interesting. Dennis, you mentioned before about people being terrified. And people always feel terrified to ask a stupid question. But I'm wondering, are those some of the skills that you're seeing are bubbling up among people's needs?
Yeah, sure. And everybody's talked about emotional intelligence a couple of times, and I think that is what people are kind of getting to. Sometimes they don't know the terms to use, but that is what they're getting to. And clearly, everyone wants to be able to ask something. Everyone thinks they're going to ask the stupid question, and when you hear it, it's not. But nobody's ever convinced that that's true for themselves. So it's important for a coach and a manager, I think, to kind of pull that information out in a way, again, that's safe. You asked earlier about what are people looking for coaching on and how they're looking to develop. one of the things that we've done in the past is, we get very specific with people. And so we'll tell people, come bring your resume with you. Print out your latest resume, bring it with you. Now you have to make sure you drive out fear, because when somebody in HR says, bring your resume with you, sometimes that can be a little terrifying. So we want to say, no, we're going to do an activity together. And so we ask people to bring their resume and we go through it and we say, what is not on here that you want on here next year? What experience, what certification, what assignment, a year from now when we're sitting here, what do you want to be able to put on your resume that's not here today? And then we're going to coach you to getting that on there. And what are the things that we need to do? And that allows them to see progress. And then they say, well, I've always wanted to do X, Y, Z. That's maybe outside of my area. Maybe I was afraid to say I wanted to do that. But when I say I want to add this as a line to my professional resume, then you're able to draw that out of folks. So it's important for the coach and the manager, if we just say there's no such thing as a stupid question, nobody believes that.
Of course, yeah.
So you have to kind of draw it out in the conversation.
Marissa?
Yeah, I would love to add. So we actually track this as part of our onboarding process, and then we provide the information back to our partners so that they can have a better understanding of what their people want to get out of coaching. And I'll say the interests development are quite broad, everything from skills that help them to be a better professional to skills that help them to be a better person. So there's two things I think are really important here. And I think the first is that it means it's so important to provide coaching that can support a broad range of needs, really for the whole person, personal and professional. And then another thing I want to mention is that even when people come into coaching wanting to improve their professional skills, what we see is that they often need to develop more of these foundational mental health and well-being skills in order to make progress. And we see this so often that we say that there's an order of operations for human growth and development, and it starts with really and truly developing a healthy and resilient mind.
Chris, did you want to add skills that your people are looking for?
Sure. It really, I think it's driven by the where the corporation is at the moment. And so in our case, we've been through a very tumultuous year in terms of integration, people leaving the organization, the entire organization becoming redesigned into one bigger corporation, just having to live in that. And so it's amazing. We've done a bunch of sentiment surveys, pulse surveys, and it all comes together at the same time. It's as we said before, how do I cope with change? How do I feel better about myself, about my work? How do I make sense of what's going on? And still, how do I energize the people around me? And so it's about the coping, the burnout, and also how do I develop a career? And it's very fundamental, but we're really trying to address it. But it is a sign of the amount of change I think that we've been through.
Yeah, you added the pandemic and and a merger. Like, does it get any more need for change management than that? I want to watch the time. I have many more questions, but I know that the audience does as well. So I'm going to start opening up the Q&A box here and see what's coming in from the audience. And yeah, we do have several really good ones. How do you identify when it's better to utilize individual coaching versus group coaching? I'll take a hand raise here. Who would like to tackle this one first? Mary?
Sure. So I ask them. That sounds so.
No,
I think a lot of people really don't know that group coaching is an option, right? So it's saying, hey, what do we need here? And then it's kind of like the distinction between coaching and training. Sometimes we have to train people for the opportunities that, like, they just don't know. They need a little orientation, because I would add team coaching to that, because you have group coaching, which is like a cohort of people going through the same thing. individual coaching, we all know what that is. And then team coaching would be a team or a project group that's focused on the same thing. And the coach comes in to help them figure out how to kind of come up against challenges and what's our agreement, right? Kind of putting a set of rules together, and then the coach can be there to support everyone through that in order to deliver some kind of outcome or get to the next level or whatever. So it's really all about the conversation, and like in coaching, the coaching term we would use is contracting with the people for what they need. And I don't think we use group and team enough. I think we over rely on the individual. So bring those conversations up in your organizations for sure.
We have another question. Says, how does conscious coaching take into account not only the individual employee, but also the culture of the company? We haven't really dived into the culture question yet, but I was waiting for it to come up, and here it is. So I'm sure you all have many thoughts on this. Who would like to go first? Go ahead, Christopher.
Sure. I think culture has everything to do with coaching and being successful. And I think the intent is, if the company is open and has a culture of helpfulness and innovation in the spirit of creativity, I think it will work. It has to be something that feels safe to people. And it's just the normal way we do things around here is we give each other feedback, and we coach and we help each other through it. So I think if the culture was not that, it would be a little bit harder. People might be more reticent, especially for peer coaching or team coaching. You don't want to open yourself up to that. So I think that the culture has everything to do with the success of any kind of program like this.
Someone else want to take on the culture and conscious coaching question? Go ahead, Marissa.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. And I feel like we can answer this on a few different levels. One, it's so important for a coach to understand the culture, because whatever someone is feeling, they're feeling that in the larger context of their organization, their community, all of those things. And so what we do is we train our coaches who are working with employees in a particular organization about that culture. And we partner with our organizations so that they can get the most helpful information. So that's one piece. And secondly, I've kind of touched on this before, but different organizations have different openness, readiness, kind of awareness of what coaching is and why it's so important. And that can have variation within different departments or in different global regions. And so when you're rolling out your coaching program, those things really need to be taken into account. And so you can incorporate it into what we call a movement maker strategy, which really builds awareness for what coaching is and why it's so valuable.
Here's another one that I believe we've touched on a little bit before, but I think it's worth repeating and maybe going a little bit deeper. What have you found to be the most important effective coaching behaviors? Mary?
So the most effective coaching behaviors are kind of my joke about the not talking and the asking of questions. So I bring that into every training I do. I don't care what the training is about. I'm like, find a place to, there's a training that I used to do a lot. It's called Fierce Conversations. Some of you probably have read that book. It's a book by Susan Scott. If you haven't read it, it's a great book. And they have a training design. And one of the quotes from that book is, let the silence do the heavy lifting. Especially right now, you heard it all around the room. It's coping skills, it's well-being, it's resilience, it's grit, it's all those things that are, we're getting through it. And so if all of us, not just the coaches, can get better at really just being with somebody and hearing them and seeing them, and also being able to not ask questions because it's about us and we want to know something because we're curious, right? That's great and everything, but really be able to say, what would you do? It's like, Dennis, that question's great. What do you want on here next year that's not here? It's a skill set to ask questions. And it's it's easy enough to go through your truly trained coaches to the managers, to anyone else in the organization. And I would say that about culture too, that if we have great self-awareness, then we can kind of stand up to the culture. We can be a part of the culture, but we can also be a role model for what it looks like to be ourselves and to say this unsayable and to ask tough questions and be okay with the answer, you know?
Erica and Dennis, I'll come to you after her.
Yes, I agree with Mary, and I just want to add to that. Some of the behaviors that I found to be most beneficial in my coaching engagements is flexibility. You know, we come in sometimes with our own mindset of, oh no, you know, you wanted to work on this is your development area, and you plan out your session, but you have to be led by your coachee and guide them at the same time, right? And so being able to let go of your agenda, as Mary said, being present with them is going to be very helpful. I always start with just a check-in. And the check-in can totally take us somewhere else that we said we were going to go one way. The next time we meet and we go somewhere else with it, because you have to be there with it. And then be agile, because while you're going somewhere else, you do understand what that ultimate goal that you agreed on was. So being able to work it and shift it in at the same time. So that flexibility and agility is going to be key.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yes, I just the trouble going after Mary and Eric because they take all the great ideas. To reiterate what they said, you know, one of the best skills you can have for when you're putting on your coaching hat is that listening. And nobody has ever been accused of listening too much. You know, so the ability to kind of let the person self-discover where they're going. If you want to institute a coaching program where you're taking managers and training them into coaching skills, you have to be patient with that, because the reason why managers are so good at what they do is they already found the answers. They know how to do things. And most leaders want to then impart that to somebody else. They want somebody to benefit from what they already know. But unfortunately, sometimes that goes against the grain of being a good coach. You know, so you have to teach managers how to not offer the solution right away. Mm-hmm. Let the person find it themselves, help, you know, put some guardrails up, help them get there. Flexibility piece that was mentioned, training leaders, current leaders, to be coaches, to be open that the person you're coaching, their solution to it might be different from the way that you have been successful. And that's not just okay, that's fantastic.
We have a couple of questions. We talked about trust at the beginning of this discussion, and there's a couple of questions related to it about breaking down a wall of distrust, how to create psychologically safe spaces for employees. So if we could just reiterate some of the best practices to create psychological safety and build trust, that would be great for these folks who are asking. Marissa, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, psychological safety, such an important topic. And there's so many building blocks, right? Because there's what we can do to promote it, but also what we have to do differently to get out of our own way. And I'll say a little bit more there. Self-awareness, I think, is the first, like, really essential component. If we're not aware of how we react to others and how we impact others, we can't do much to then create a safe space for others, make them feel like they're valued, you know, what they have to say matters. So that's a really kind of important and critical component that is developed and supported through coaching. And then there are other pieces of that, like clear communication. You not only have to kind of know yourself and make sure you have your emotions in check, but being clear about what's expected, what's needed, etc. All kind of critical skills that are supported through coaching.
We have another group of questions that is very targeted toward getting buy-in and proving the ROI of coaching. So I will take any recommendations for how to make a business case for implementing a coaching program and what the ROI might be. Mary?
So this is always a tough one, because the second we start talking about ROI and coaching, it's almost like that the coach is then like, I got to get them to do this thing. And then that gets into the issues like Dennis, Marissa, all of you are saying about we don't want to do that. We want them to find their own best solution, and their own best solution might be leaving the organization. Right? Like it could be anything, and that might be the best thing for everyone. So what I do is I tell everybody up front that if it's about fixing someone, I'm not going to do it. I have the advantage of doing that. I can do that because of the fact that there's so many of them and only one of me. And also I say how we're going to measure it is about what you think has changed. Coachy, what have you noticed has changed? And they have to say that to their sponsor. The sponsor could be their boss, the HR person, whoever brought them into coaching. And then the manager, HR, whoever, the sponsor has to say what they noticed has changed. And sometimes, the only thing that's changed is the manager says, I don't even know what's changed, but we're not having any of those issues. And everybody's happy. Everybody wins. Everybody wins. And I explained the thing about sometimes people want to leave the organization to everyone before we start. That's part of the contracting process. It's a specific way to coach, and certainly you can measure ROI in different ways. But so far, people have been so pleased that they're still whispering in back rooms about it, right? Like, so do you want coaching? Don't tell. It still has a little bit of a stigma to it, less so since the pandemic, which is great. But it's like, that perception means everything, because there's a lot of depth underneath that,
Erica, you wanted to add? Marissa, you're next.
I think it's along the lines of what Mary was saying. So I'll just say, we start ours with a 360. And so we do a customized one depending on the coaching engagement, and we follow up with pulses and then another one throughout at the end. So that's where we're able to actually see, again, not just from that person, but from the other perspectives. Another thing that we notice is engagement. So when we look at engagement numbers from those leaders who are involved in programs as such and coaching, we do see an improvement, especially around communication, which we all may know, and research shows that that communication openly and effective increases engagement in that manager direct report relationship. So that's where we've been able to see it. We're looking forward to identifying more ways, but it has shown evidence of improvement in those areas.
Yeah, we love our data at BetterUp to show improve our value. And some of the things we look at are people using it? Do they like it? Are they seeing the value and the impact? Are others seeing the value and the impact? And then we have validated measures for different behavioral scales. So everything from mental well-being to the whole person, leadership skills, well-being, outcomes like resilience, productivity. And the next step, that top level, that's the ultimate, is connecting that coaching engagement to business outcomes. Things like Erica mentioned, are you seeing changes in engagement in your own data? Are you seeing improvement in productivity scores? So those are the levels I think are important to prove out ROI.
We had a quick follow-up, and we're almost out of time, but I think we have enough time for this one. If someone has been coached and the problems go away, how do you coach management to move on from this person's past mistakes, or to accept that this person has grown and are capable of having a promotion or more responsibility? That's a great question. Perception is really tough in that case, because people are stuck in their perception. Chris?
Yeah, I think there's some coaching for the leadership there too, to say, give the person a chance. You've invested in them, and now let them, sit back, have a little bit of a time horizon, and watch them succeed. So I think their expectations need to be managed along the way as well.
That's pretty much bumping on our time. So we did have a lot more questions. We could talk about this for another hour, but folks in the audience, if you'd like to connect with our stellar panelists, please feel free to reach out to them via LinkedIn or their websites. You can also connect with me anytime. And Erica, Dennis, Chris, Mary, and Marissa, thank you so much for being with me. It was a pleasure. Steve?
Yes, thank you, Lydia, and all of our speakers for such a thoughtful and actionable conversation. It was not only about coaching, I thought, but it was also some actual coaching that I was absorbing as well. So thanks again to our sponsor, BetterUp, and to all of you for participating today, and those who posed such good questions for our experts in the last 15 minutes. Now, if you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website at fromday1.co and check out more of our upcoming webinars. On Tuesday, January 25th, we're talking about closing the access gap to build a more diverse tech workforce. On Thursday, January 27th, we'll be talking about making sustainability part of your corporate culture. And finally, on Tuesday, February 1st, we'll be discussing on how to make benefits work for women in your workplace. Thanks, everyone. Stay well. Bye for now.